Hello! Welcome back to my channel. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening depending on when you're watching this, but welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. First and foremost, thank you for the positive feedback I got on yesterday's video. 15 of you subscribed to my channel, which I never anticipated, so that makes me feel really good. And there's quite a few views on it, so that means at least a good chunk of you watched it, which I appreciate. I will say though, the average watch time on that video was only up to about the 6-minute mark, and that was definitely not the full video, so I can see that. Just keep that in mind. Anyways, shall we just jump into today? Welcome to, let's call this day 2 of virtual learning, because those first 3 days I think were a fever dream, because we were in school, then we were out of school, then we had 3 days of online, and then spring break. So let's call this day 2. It's day 2 of term 4, and we'll just move right along. The first thing I'd like to do today is give you your recommendation of something to do while you're bored at home. And that today is going to be a movie. Maybe you've heard of it, but the movie I recommend to you is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you've heard of this movie, great. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. It's a movie from the 80s. It's about a guy named Ferris Bueller and a couple of his buddies, and they decide to, I don't know, not go to school that day because it's just way too nice out in Chicago. Definitely a feel-good kind of movie, very positive, very fun, maybe some emotions you might need right now. Who knows, it's just kind of a dreary time. I think it's been raining for the past 4 days, so there's that. Go check it out, it's really great, and if you've seen it, go watch it again! Duh! Anyways, so there's that. Let's move into what we need to do today. The first thing I'd like to address is on your attendance forms, I have the question of, do you have any questions? And I got a couple yesterday, so let's address them. The first question I got is, how often are you going to be making these videos? And the answer to that is I have no idea. I don't think they'll be every single day. I will try to do them as frequently as possible because I do feel like they have a bit of a positive influence, but if not, please let me know because, well, just let me know. Sometimes we won't need them. This, again, is to kind of help give another differentiation of how instruction is given, and some days it might just be continue on from what we were working on, especially if we are reading a book soon. You probably will maybe have to just continue reading and answer some questions. They also, unfortunately, fall at the bottom of my totem pole. I need to grade and I need to plan your lessons and try to make them as fun and educational as possible, so unfortunately, videos come last. But I will try to make them as frequently as I can if they continue to help. The next thing I got asked is about attendance forms. So I do post an attendance form with every single task day or agenda, whatever you want to call it. And the attendance form is going to be due whenever your tasks are due. So for example, yesterday I told you that you had to write notes and make class notes about a topic. And those PowerPoints were due to me this morning at 7:30. So that is when I would expect your attendance form to be complete. Obviously in school, your attendance is based on if you're in class or not, and through virtual school, the way I can tell if you're in class or not is by your completion of tasks. So that is why I put attendance at the very end of our agenda, because once you've completed what I've asked, you can then say, hey, I was in class today. So there's that. I will try to maybe have it written somewhere on our task days as we go forward, but you should know that. The next question I got, my notes are over here, don't say anything. My next question is, how are we reading Of Mice and Men? That is a fabulous question, and the answer to that is I will be posting a PDF online, and that is how you'll be reading the text itself. Unfortunately, I wish I could give you physical copies. I have them at school, but not enough to give to all 85 of my kids. So you will be reading it as a PDF. There's also audio versions posted on YouTube that I will link in each chapter we read. If you would really like, I would be willing to read them on one of these videos, and you can follow along with me if that helps. You just gotta let me know in the comments below. Gosh, I was born to do this, wasn't I? So natural. Anyways, so if that is something you would want, let me know. And then finally, if you have access to a physical copy, you're more than welcome to use it. If you have one at home or if a library is open near you, feel free to go get one, but just know that I can't give you a physical copy currently. So online is how we're doing it. My last and final question or kind of comment that I received was, how is virtual learning going to continue to go? And the answer to that is I really don't know. We're all trying our best. We're all in a very interesting circumstance, and all we can do right now is keep pushing forward. So I will keep doing my best, and you just got to keep doing your best. Whether we'll be back at the end of April or who knows. But all we can do right now is be patient, and hopefully things will go back to normal as soon as they can. But right now we need to prioritize safety, and with that just means virtual learning. So we got this, right? Okay, those are my questions. If you ever have a question, please leave them in my attendance form and I will try to answer them in the next video. So now you know I don't just not read them. I think some of you think I just skip through it, but I don't. So ha. Alright, let's move into our agenda for the day. So, our agenda for the day, are you ready, folks? Is one, obviously watch this video. Watch the whole thing. Don't make my average time only about 2/3 of the way. Thank you. The second thing I would like you to do is, if you haven't caught on already, you're going to need the notes from all the other topics from yesterday. So, what you need to do is go look over those PowerPoints and take notes on them. There should be five. You should be having notes on the Great Depression. You should have notes on John Steinbeck, which is our author. You should have notes on migration workers and the Dust Bowl. You should have notes on developmental delays. That's the word I use. And then you should also have notes on possible censorship of this book. So those are the 5 topics you need notes on. If you want to, you could pause right here and go take those notes and then come right back and hear what we have to do next. I'll wait. I hated this too, don't worry. Alright, so let's talk about American modernism. So that is our next time period in the literary timeline, and it's bouncing right off of realism. So we had realism with our town and the expectation, or like the social norm and the realistic format of what Americans looked like, what the American town looked like, that cookie cutter format, right? So now we're moving into modernism, and modernism takes place during 1914 to about 1946. And if you know anything about American history, you know a lot of things happened during that about 30-year time chunk. World War I happened, the Great Depression happened, and I know we at least started World War II. I think we even had the entire war during modernism. Quote me if I'm wrong. But a lot of not so great things were happening. And that's kind of what it teetered this. So in 1917 is when America first joined World War I. And that is where we kind of start seeing, or really starting to see, these ideas of modernism. And modernism, if you have to think of it this way, is a very pessimistic mindset. Because we entered this vicious war, and the perspective on life began to change because we had kind of lost this innocent, like, I can achieve anything. We started turning our idealism, or our, like, high hopes, into very cynic, very negative mindsets. So we entered World War I, that wrapped up, and then we moved right into the Great Depression. The stock market crashed, people were jobless, they were homeless, they couldn't afford to eat, and we also had an agricultural crisis, if you knew about it. It's called the Dust Bowl, and that affected a lot of farmhands, the working class, and it involved migrant workers. And migrant workers are actually who we're going to be following in our story, but basically in the Midwest, there was the Dust Bowl, people couldn't grow crops anymore, so people who worked in fields started moving to the West Coast where things were kind of okay, but because we were in an economic crisis, California and the West Coast couldn't sustain all the people trying to move in because they barely had enough jobs with people of their population. So it wasn't great. It was a really tough time on America. That is where modernism kind of stemmed. So we had this negative affiliation now. It's called disillusionment. Or basically, it's this belief that we are not able to achieve what we originally thought we could achieve or accomplish. Maybe this sounds familiar if you've read Gatsby. What I'm talking about here is the American dream. Modernism is the epitome of, can we still do this? Are we able to actually accomplish what we set out to do? It's a huge theme in Great Gatsby, and guess what? Great Gatsby is right during this time period. So Americans start to wonder, are we able to achieve what we set out before? Because that was the foundation of our country, right? We broke away from the British and we said, hey, we're going to be our own people, we're going to be our own individuals, we're going to have our own beliefs and our own freedoms, and we're going to be whoever we want to be. But all of a sudden, with all these terrible, terrible things happening, we didn't think it was possible anymore. So that's how modernism kind of started. Specifically, in relation to like literature and the arts, we started new styles and breaking away from traditional themes or methods. So things were kind of being stepped outside the norm. We said, obviously this isn't working, obviously this isn't accomplishing anything, so let's try something different. Because in a lot of their minds, they had nothing left to lose. Speaking of minds, a very popular thing during modernism was psychology. Two popular movements that came out of modernism was Marxism and psychoanalysis. So both of these methods, or these like movements, if you want to call them, led to the breakdown of traditional beliefs and values. See how we're kind of repeating themes here, right? So what ended up happening is they tried to break down who we are as people. Why do we think the way we think? Why do we do the things we do? And what makes us as individuals possible? We might be a group, but what are our thoughts and our thinkings behind what makes us who we are? What came out of this, literary-wise, was something called a stream of consciousness narration, which basically is when a character's, the writing is a character's, consciousness. So imagine all the thoughts that, your daily thoughts, imagine if all those were just put on paper. That's a stream of consciousness. And you kind of see the inner workings of a character's mind. So that was a very popular style of writing during this time period. Another thing that kind of came out of it is the New American Hero. And it was more, instead of being like the superhero sort of model, like the guy who has unnatural abilities, it was now the hero was the man of action or the person of action. It was the warrior, it was the tough competitor, it was the one who strived, right? Instead of just being like, I'm Superman and I have flight and impeccable strength. But now it's more, I have honor and courage and I'm a man of action and I fight for what I want. Finally, kind of to wrap this all up, the elements of modernism in American literature. So, as I said, there was this emphasis on bold experimentation with style and form, specifically in art itself. So, like painting, sculptures, literature, all that fun stuff. They played with new style and form as a reflection of the fragmentation of our society. We rejected traditional themes and subjects, and we lost faith in this possibility of an American dream, which is pretty heartbreaking, honestly. We rejected this ideal, superhero kind of hero main character, and we favored someone who worked for what they tried to accomplish. We wanted a hardworking warrior of a hero. And then finally, we showed interest in the inner workings of the human mind. What made us tick? What still makes us tick? Why we think the things we think, why we do the things we do, what makes us as individual as possible, and how can we implement those ideas as techniques in our art and literature. So that, in a nutshell, is modernism. Now, not to confuse you, but let me say something real quick. While our book is taking place during the modernism period, it also has themes of the social realism time period. Thing about literature is ideas and ideology can sometimes overlap. Modernism is a reaction to realism, and while modernism obviously has some concrete differentiation, it also has some similar things of realism. So what I want to touch on really quick is what social realism is and how it kind of plays into modernism. So social realism only takes place about 1930s to 1950s, and it was a response to the Great Depression and the aftermath of World War II. and it focused on the working class specifically, because if you remember during the Great Depression, I mentioned the Dust Bowl and migrant workers being affected. So that is what they tried to focus on, and they focused on themes of social and racial injustice. Modernism is like the umbrella, and social realism is kind of just one of those rain droplets underneath. So just keep it in mind. All the main characters during these types of writings were like working class characters, and that's what we're going to see in this story. And the purpose of this type of writing was to value the poor and working class, which we had such a high population of during the Great Depression and these two wars. And it also was trying to expose a lot of the greed and indifference the rich were having, or the upper class / powerful people. So again, not 100% realism, not 100% modernism, but it does fit with our modernism category because this is something that people wouldn't have done during realism. No one wanted to step outside the line with realism, everyone wanted to kind of stay in their box, and modernism allowed people to break out of it. So while it has that idea of realism, keep that in mind with our modernism time period, specifically with Of Mice and Men. I hope that makes sense. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I will be posting a PowerPoint along with what I just discussed in case you are someone who still likes to see the words or take notes better that way, but I did still want to kind of take the time to discuss with you what modernism was and what we're going to be seeing in our story. Okay, well, so you have your notes on modernism. Let's do a quick recap. Up to this point, you should have all your notes on the 5 topics for this unit from yesterday. Then you should also take notes on this modernism stuff. There was my chunk of talking, and then I also should be posting a PowerPoint that kind of sums up what I said, if that is more beneficial to you. The last thing I'd like you to do today before you take your attendance form is I would like you to complete a written response. What I mean by that is Posted to Classroom should be a document, and on there the prompt states, how does modernism compare to realism? What I'd like you to do is take your notes from realism, take your notes from today, and maybe even do a little bit of research. And I'd like you to compare the 2 different time periods. So what is similar about modernism and realism? What's different about them? What affected them? I would like about 2-3 paragraphs about this. You will be doing a research paper at some point, so let's practice our research skills, right? If you choose to do some research, what I'd like you to do is find an actual, accurate source. Please don't use Wikipedia. Please don't use a random Prezi you found on Google. Find something accurate about realism and modernism, and I would like you to cite it at the bottom of your page. If you only use the notes provided from class, please indicate that to me as well. Bottom line, I'd like to know where you got all your information from, whether it be from me in class or from the internet itself. Like I said, 2-3 paragraphs. I just want you to compare the 2 and kind of see how they overlap or what makes them different as we move into this next time period, especially because we saw a little bit of that overlap already. Once you were done with that, please turn it into Classroom. Let's say it's due, let's go with midnight. We are going to transition back into everything's due by midnight, so that means your response and your attendance form. Once you are done with your 2-3 paragraphs about comparing the 2, please complete the attendance form, ask me any questions you might have, etc., etc. That is all I have for you today, ladies and gentlemen. I know this is a bit of a longer video, but I had some notes for you. I won't try to make all of them this long. I know just watching me talk for a long time can be a little dull, so I do my best. If you need anything, as always, I'm only an email away. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye!